Hi, Richard Louie. Here's what's happening. Syrian state television reports the Israeli military carried out airstrikes near Damascus today. 10 explosions were heard in that area, according to a human rights group. No word on casualties.
Syrian media say Israel has carried out airstrikes on 2 government-held areas near the capital Damascus. According to the Syrian television channels, Israeli aircraft pounded an area near Damascus International Airport and a smaller airport in the town of Damascus. The so-called Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said at least 10 explosions were heard in Damascus. There has been no report of casualties. The Israeli army has declined to comment on these reports. Israel has carried out several airstrikes in Syria since the start of the conflict in the country in 2011.
Israeli fighter jets have reportedly targeted a warehouse near the Damascus airport. This is being reported by both Syrian state television and a Hezbollah-backed TV station in Lebanon. CNN senior international correspondent Ben Wiedemann joining us now from Jerusalem. So, Ben, what more can you tell us about these reported airstrikes and why?
Well, according to the state media in Damascus, there were 2 airstrikes around dusk. One on a storage facility at Damascus International Airport, another one in a place called Damascus, which is on the highway between Damascus and the Lebanese capital. Now, of course, the Syrian media as well as the Syrian army have accused Israel of launching these airstrikes. However, as is customary in these cases, Israeli officials are declining any comment on these alleged attacks on Syria. Now, there have been a series of airstrikes on Damascus and other Syrian cities since the beginning of 2013 that are widely attributed to Israel. Israel apparently is very worried about the possibility of advanced weapon systems being shipped from Syria to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Frederica?
And then, Ben, what's the message, if any, from Israel?
Well, certainly I think if you look at the way they look at the Syrian conflict, they want to stay out, but they're very concerned about the possibility of weapon systems, being sent from Iran to Syria and from Syria to Hezbollah. So those are really their primary concerns. For instance, the Israeli forces are basically face-to-face with a Nusra Front, which is an affiliate of Al-Qaeda, along the line that separates Israeli-controlled territory from Syria, but they've stayed largely out of the conflict and only become involved when they feel that there are weapon systems being moved around that endanger Israel itself. Frederica?
All right, Ben Wiedemann, keep us posted. Thank you so much.
The Syrian military is accusing Israel of carrying out 2 airstrikes near Damascus International Airport. For more details, we can cross live now to Paula Sleer, who is in Jerusalem. Paula, welcome again. What do we know about these alleged strikes so far?
Well, as you say, at this stage, they are alleged strikes. We are receiving pictures that you see. These are circulating on Twitter. But as of yet, they are unverified. They're the only photographic evidence that we have at this stage. The information we're receiving is that there have been some 6 alleged Israeli strikes at military bases on the outskirts of the capital, Damascus. This is between the border of Syria and Lebanon. At the same time, we've heard from Hezbollah, and they say that at least 1 hour before the strikes, there were Israeli jets circling overhead. Now, eyewitnesses on the ground say that there were massive explosions. We're not hearing any reports of casualties. Israel has kept mum. It's neither denied nor confirmed these reports, but there have been similar situations on at least 3 previous occasions in 2006, 2007, and 2012, when Israeli warplanes were believed to have carried out strikes in Damascus, and the Israeli reaction at that stage was the same, just basically keeping quiet. Again, the reports we are receiving suggest that these strikes were indicating warehouses where S-300 missiles were being stored that Israel presumably was worried could be used against her.
Israel launched 2 airstrikes on targets in Syria Sunday, according to state-run media in Damascus. Around dusk Sunday, 2 strikes took place, one near Damascus International Airport, where, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which monitors events in Syria, the target was a storage facility. The second strike was near the town of Damascus on the road from Damascus to the Lebanese border. A statement from the Syrian army said there were no casualties, only material damage, and went on to say that the Israeli attack was designed to lift the morale of the terror groups, primarily the Nusra Front and the Islamic State, after the blows they've received from the Syrian army. Israeli officials declined to comment on these reports. Israeli media is noting, however, that in his weekly cabinet meeting Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel is closely monitoring the Middle East and what is happening with open eyes and ears. And a lot is happening, he said. We will stay informed and we will deal with these unremitting threats and challenges. Israeli analysts suggest that these words may have been an oblique foreshadowing of the strikes on Syria later in the day. It is widely believed that Israel was behind a series of airstrikes on targets inside Syria since early 2013. The strikes are believed to be targeting advanced weapon systems destined for transport to the radical Lebanese group Hezbollah, a key Syrian ally which has provided fighters to the Syrian regime in the ongoing civil war. Ben Wiedemann, CNN, Jerusalem.
Ben, thank you for that report. Let's bring in Phil Muddies, a CNN counterterrorism analyst, also former CIA and FBI analyst. Let's talk about this strike, not confirmed by IDF yet, but that's typical. IDF usually isn't going to say anything about this. You do not read this as Israel joining the coalition force fight against ISIS.
No, I think this is part of a much older fight that's been going on for many years, and that is you got a couple of potential targets here. One is Syria is a military adversary for Israel. I think there's a good chance that target in Damascus was something like missile parts. The second is Lebanese Hezbollah. Beirut International Airport is the place where Iran sends in weaponry for Hezbollah. They might have been hitting, that is the Israelis, weapons going down from that airport into Lebanon.
And in terms of whether we are going to hear anything from Israel, A, do you think we will? Wouldn't be typical. And B, just bigger picture, very importantly, in this unstable region, what is Syria, what is Assad going to do about it?
There's not much he can do. I don't think the Israelis will say much. They've done this, by the way, in the past, in the recent past. So this is not without precedent. Look, Assad is going to come back and say, this is about aiding the terrorists, as he's already said. This has nothing to do with that fight, and there's not much he can do about it.
Captured on covert military cameras, this is a rare glimpse of Israel's ability to monitor the brutal fighting in Syria in real time. All of Syria's neighbors are watching its conflict, but few have a ringside seat like this. The mountains of the Golan Heights are bristling with Israeli surveillance. A strategic vantage point monitoring the civil war unfolding just miles away. Israel's paratroopers are the latest infantry brigade to be charged with defending this hostile border.
This is Syria, the highest mountain.
Weaponry, surveillance and manpower have all been intensified for fear the fighting might creep closer. An increased readiness and little belief in the prospects for peace.
The threat is still here, and of course we are looking to see what will happen in Syria and in Geneva, but daily we have to take care of the threat, first of all.
The battles for these villages and towns have been less intense than in the north of Syria, but they have continued nonetheless. Since the summer of 2012, disparate rebel groups have taken control of more than half the towns here. The regime of President Assad still just about controls villages like that one, and for the Israeli military positions that are so close to that village, that's no bad thing. They'd far prefer that to jihadist rebel groups in terms of the threat they may pose to Israeli civilians. But there is a flip side. While President Assad remains in power, his biggest backer, Iran, continues to have an influence in Syria. And for the Israelis, that itself poses a very grave threat. Israel is the only country neighbouring Syria not to have been flooded with Syrian refugees. But its enemy status means it's under a different kind of pressure. A knowledge that whichever side eventually comes out on top is likely to remain deeply hostile to Israel. A new high-tech barrier along the demilitarized border zone reflects the concern. Sporadic exchanges of fire have already taken place. For now, the real bloodshed remains at a distance, and Israel hopes it can keep it that way.